Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, can I just like to pick up on a few points that Mark made, and really to pick them out at random. The first thing he mentioned was collaboration, and I think that I'm sorry. Is that okay? Can everybody hear me? I need to. Okay. Collaboration, and I think that this is a key issue, because it seems to me that an abiding feature of life now is for organisations to recognise that they can become more influential and more powerful by being in collaboration between themselves. And this is a much more powerful and influential way of dealing with affairs. And it's a way in which the Royal Commonwealth Society certainly works, and I very much hope, Mark, that we'll be able to talk about that offline, about ways in which we can work more closely with your organisation. You talked about trust. I think this is a very interesting concept, particularly at a time perhaps when trust in, forgive me, so domestic politics, maybe politics generally is not necessarily at an all-time high, and also at a time when the strength of civil society, the individual, the ability of the individual to engage and have a view through the internet and social networking and so on has become so important. Establishing trust between peoples, I think, leads to an enormous strength, and trust equals reliance and acceptance and agreement on trade issues or other of those ways in which countries communicate and work together. And I think the other point I wanted to make, really picking up on what you said, Mark, was that the Commonwealth, I think, perhaps like many institutions, has tended to be rather introspective. It's looked in on itself and has been consumed with its own affairs and its own politics and its own tensions. I think the interesting thing that is beginning to develop, that I perceive, is that the Commonwealth is beginning to recognise that it needs to be stronger in terms of where the Commonwealth fits with non-Commonwealth countries. The fact of life is that every Commonwealth country is surrounded by countries that are not of the Commonwealth. They naturally have engagements across their border, and it seems to me to make absolute common sense that the Commonwealth starts to position itself as an organisation that stands for something that has got views and is engaging outside of the Commonwealth with non-Commonwealth countries. So just a few points I wanted to pick up on some of those at a later stage. Can I just start really, again, you gave me a good prompt, Mark, by talking about definitions. And this was quite a learning experience for me, because although I'm familiar with many of these things, I recognise that I'm talking to an audience and I'm engaging with an expert in these fields. So I'd just like to make some definitions that will, I hope, explain where I'm coming from. They might not fit with your own definitions, but at least we understand where we are. And this is a very informed audience, and as I say, this institution is extremely expert. You won't have anything to learn from me about the concept of cultural diplomacy, but it strikes me that the idea of exchanging thoughts, information, values, and sharing interests in the arts, sports, and so on is clearly not new or indeed original. What perhaps is new, that a science might be developed around the concept and that the practice might be codified. And clearly, governments would like to wring as much value from every available source of international influence that they can. In my own country, investment in the British Council has not been entirely without ulterior motive. And there is a long-standing and increasing pressure on the international aid budget to align spend with UK national interests. In 2013, the UK government made public a report on soft power, And I think the key point that emerged was that the UK government recognises the relevance and importance of cultural diplomacy, or soft power, if I may use that generic, but has no well-defined mechanism for developing the technique or for feeling in control of the advantages. And of course, there is a real issue in the contemporary financial circumstances to governments providing support for largely non-governmental agencies that can deliver soft power in its many and varied forms. Most non-governmental agencies, I think, are suffering from funding problems at the moment. But this seems to be particularly disappointing because of the evident need for engagement, tolerance, and understanding in a troubled world. I think it's also worth saying that soft power or cultural diplomacy is not in competition with highly successful alternatives. I believe that what might be called commercial diplomacy is a preeminent force in the world today, and interestingly, it's a form of diplomacy that is also exercised by non-governmental agencies. In another sphere, I was having a meeting this morning with the Royal Society, which is undertaking cultural diplomacy through the medium of science. So I think there are many ways in which countries can engage with each other, and they are all individually important and collectively important. Can I now just say a few words about the Commonwealth, and forgive me if you are already well informed on what is the association. The genes of the Commonwealth, of course, stretch back to the early reaches of empire, but the modern Commonwealth began in 1949 at the end of a meeting of Commonwealth Prime Ministers in London, convened expressly to consider the desire of India, on becoming a republic, to remain in the Commonwealth. In a short statement, the Prime Ministers adopted a formula that opened the way for a new concept of worldwide association that, in the words of Nehru, the Indian Prime Minister at the time, would bring a touch of healing to a troubled world. So what is the Commonwealth? Well, it's often defined rather more easily by what it is not. It's not a treaty organisation, it has no legal personality, it's not a defence or a security organisation, it's not a trade association or a health and education organisation, and neither is it an aid organisation. It does provide technical assistance, advice, advocacy, support in all of these areas, and these contributions are important, particularly to the smaller countries. No one in 1949 could have foreseen the way in which the Commonwealth has evolved. Its population now totals 2.3 billion. 60% of that population is under the age of 30, and the demographic is trending downwards. There are 53 member countries, 31 of which count themselves as small states. Many of these small states are island nations. 16 of the countries are realms, which retain Her Majesty the Queen as their head of state. Non-member countries with no previous British connection are queuing up to join, and the most recently integrated members of the association are Rwanda and Mozambique. In many ways, the Commonwealth provides a seat at the table of influence for smaller states with limited resources. The Commonwealth is what it has always been, basically a club. It's a club with rules. Membership is voluntary, and governments can choose to withdraw at any time. But to get in and to remain a part of it, members are expected to conduct themselves according to the rules embodied in the many declarations and shared experience that Commonwealth governments have made over the years, setting out the values and the principles for which the club stands. And of course, just as in any other group of diversity, each member of the club must establish their own distinctive personality and build a brand that defines their people and their culture to make them stand out from the crowd. Again, for smaller states, the Commonwealth provides an arena for this sort of presentation. I might just pause a moment and reflect on the fact that the Commonwealth Games, a sort of poor man's Olympics, if you like, has just been held in Glasgow. One of the interesting things to me about the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow was that significant efforts were made to make the Games affordable. And I think this is very interesting in the context of the Commonwealth. Most countries of the world now would shy away from holding the Olympic Games because of the cost. I can't remember what the cost of the UK taxpayer was, but it's something like £11 billion for, probably more than that, for hosting the Olympics. The Commonwealth Games was run on a budget of about 500 million. I think that out of the Commonwealth Games, some views have come about ways in which some of the smaller states of the Commonwealth might be able to host the Commonwealth Games. In March 2012, all Commonwealth heads of government established a charter that recommitted every member state to the values of the Commonwealth. The terms of the charter refer to equality and respect for the protection and promotion of civil, political, economic, social and cultural rights, including the right to development, for all without discrimination on any grounds, as the foundations of peaceful, just and stable societies. And it's these values that so far have defined the Commonwealth. It is in the pursuit of these values that the Commonwealth relevance is established within its member countries, and they in turn, I think, distinguish the Commonwealth as an international community. However, paradoxically, this values-based endeavour has arguably been counterproductive. Agendas such as conflict resolution, for example in Sri Lanka, or independence of the judiciary and the democratic process, for example in Fiji and in Zimbabwe, have created tensions in the Commonwealth. While most Commonwealth countries have signed up to the equality of women and the protection against forced marriage, the actuality of enforcement is disappointing. The matter of LGBTI rights remains a most difficult and contentious issue. And in reality, for many Commonwealth countries, a course regarded as tantamount to political suicide within their own domestic environments. This brings me, after a rather prolonged preamble, to the relevance of cultural diplomacy in the building and healing nature of non-governmental links and engagement, as exemplified by the arts and culture. The reality is that what characterises the Commonwealth the Commonwealth Club, is the shared experience of language, learning and the law. This non-governmental glue has given birth to a multitude of Commonwealth fraternities that meet and work together routinely, despite occasional official spats and disagreements, which combine to give substance to the membership of the club. This is a relevant moment perhaps to present the character and credentials of the Royal Commonwealth Society. We are a body incorporated by the rather quaint but prestigious vehicle of a royal charter, and we're a charity. We have developed as the Commonwealth has grown and developed itself over nearly 150 years, and I like to feel that we're a modern, agile and well-connected organisation. Our role as the most broadly based and best equipped non-governmental body in the Commonwealth space is to promote the value of the association and the values that underpin it, and to do so as an independent body. We are importantly well connected with the governmental and intergovernmental structure, but crucially our strength is based on non-governmental relationships, and particularly on the engagement we have with the youth of the Commonwealth. These informal connections not only serve to define the value of the Commonwealth, but serve also as a medium for the individual countries and states to practice their own agendas in presenting their identity, to take pride in their character and achievements. And this, of course, is particularly true for the small countries that don't have the available resources to establish their own culture or aid councils. The Commonwealth, therefore, is not a cartel of the big boys. It is an organisation that is held together by a much more subtle means of association, where common interest, shared understanding, not force, is the link binding them together. Perhaps more importantly, given the nature now of emerging world politics, the Commonwealth is made up of every major religion. There are currently over 620 million Muslims, 440 million Christians, and 32 million Buddhists. And even semi-detached political commentators are recognising the underlying religious division to much of the hostility expressed between and within countries. And so the Commonwealth, with its multi-religious base, is a strength for tolerance and respect, and we believe that it can have an impact on softening the tensions of religious differences in the world. Can I also reflect on Commonwealth trade? And may I emphasise that I'm not advocating any realistic advantage in the UK withdrawing from some sort of symbiotic relationship with the European Union. Nevertheless, the fact is that UK exports to the Commonwealth are growing far quicker than with the EU. Over the period from 2002 to 2012, exports to Commonwealth countries increased by 132%, while they rose by a modest 45% to the EU. As a consequence, the Commonwealth's share of exports increased from 6.5% to 8.5%, while the EU share fell from 55% to 45%. Now, clearly these are different orders, but if you look at the trajectory of change, I think there's a very interesting reflection. And given the youthful nature of the Commonwealth and the growing middle classes in India and in Africa, it is difficult to imagine these trends reversing. Commonwealth countries taken together look like winners. I think by way of conclusion, and to bring some coherence to my address in the context of your conference, the Commonwealth is defined by the binding strengths of the non-governmental links that result from a shared history, broadly common aspirations for the present and the future, and a recognition that despite its imperfections and lack of formality, perhaps because of these failings, it is a club. And like all the best clubs should be, that provides comfort and congeniality together with a stage to define individuality and character. It is, of course, in these areas where creativity are so important, and where the very real interests of the arts, sport, and so on are so relevant and so contemporary. The interesting thing is that although undoubtedly the Commonwealth is struggling to define its purpose at the moment and its relevance in the face of national interests, it is not in numerical decline. Indeed, as I mentioned earlier, the recently joined members, Rwanda and Mozambique, have no historical connection with the old empire. The Commonwealth has an interesting past, but its future is secure as social media, the international web, and the restless search of commerce serve to loosen up the more traditional forms of interaction and diplomacy. Thank you, ladies.